So we're here with Hugh Lewis. He's Head of Sustainability Insight and Strategy at Gusto. Hugh, thank you so much for joining us today. So for anyone in the audience who doesn't know, could you just tell us a little bit about what Gusto does?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for having me. So Gusto is a pioneer of the UK recipe box industry. We were founded back in 2012, and we were founded by Timo, our CEO, with the goal to minimize food waste. And we're now one of the largest recipe box companies in the country. So we've got around about 1,500 employees. We deliver around about 7.5 million meals per month. And as a customer, you select which recipes you want delivered to you, the number of portions, then the day of delivery, and the menu that you see changes each week. We have 80 plus recipes, and Gusto box arrives containing all of the ingredients in pre-portioned quantities and recipe cards for you to create some tasty home-cooked meals.
And so you were founded with the intention of solving against food waste, and it, you know, having a look at your website, it seems like you guys really are leading in this space. So could you tell us about some of the actions that you've taken to meet that purpose?
Of course. So I mentioned that we were kind of founded with this goal of cutting food waste, and it may be worth taking a little bit of a step back to talk about the role of food in the fight against climate change. And 25 to 30% of emissions come from food production and distribution. So if we don't transform the food industry, in 80 years' time, emissions from our food system alone will be 3 times greater than the global carbon budget for a 1.5 degree world. So food is responsible for a lot of the negative environmental impacts today, but it also holds a lot of the future solutions. I guess if you were to put it very bluntly, if we fail on food, we've failed. And Gusto is a business which is trying to change the food system by minimizing food waste, and it's part of our DNA. So as a Gusto customer, when you order your recipes and you receive your box, you get pre-portioned ingredients for your recipes. There are 2 parts of that customer journey which are particularly important. The first is that it's a much shorter route to a customer. We don't have supermarket stores with that energy consumption and the difficulty of getting the right amount of food in the right place at the right time. And secondly, the ingredients which Gusto customers receive, because they're in those exact quantities, cuts food waste in the home. And that matters because 2.5 billion tons of food is wasted globally every year, and that accounts for 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot of that food waste happens in the home. So in the UK, after food leaves the farm, 70% of the waste occurs in people's households. So both of those factors mean that Gusto has very low food waste in our operations, and also allows customers to cut their food waste to almost zero in the home. And that means that when you run what is called a comparative life cycle assessment, comparing the Gusto model versus the standard supermarket model, Gusto reduces emissions by 23% versus the equivalent meal bought from a supermarket store. And if you scale that up to the volume of food that we sell, this means that in 2022, our customers cut their carbon footprint by shopping with Gusto by 60,000 tons of CO2. So it's fantastic that our business model has this kind of positive impact in terms of changing the way that the food system operates. But I guess ultimately that's not enough. And we as a business need to also do much more to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And we're doing a lot of the things that you'll see out in the market. We've measured our impact. We're setting science-based targets. We've got lots of exciting initiatives with more in the pipeline. Maybe just to give you 3 examples, on our sites, we're building a 1 megawatt solar panel array, which will mean that next year, 24% of Gusto's electricity needs will come from solar panels on our sites. Dietary change plays a huge role here. The food that we sell represents about 50% of our carbon footprint. So we're doing lots to encourage more sustainable diets. Last year, we trialed what we called the Carbon Cutting Cuisine Collection, which showed customers lower carbon recipes that provided them with the information that they needed to make more sustainable choices. And we've also been changing our menu, mainly to offer more choice and more sustainable options. Back when I joined Gusto in 2019, the percentage of orders that only contained vegetarian meals was just 4.7%. And by last year, by 2022, that had almost doubled to 9.1%. And there's a broader flexitarian trend, which we're seeing as well, with increasing numbers of customers ordering vegetarian meals alongside the meat meals that they might order.
I mean, clearly, what you're doing is incredibly important for people and for planet, and you're having a huge amount of success there. So is it as good for business as it is for people and planet?
Yeah, I think there's a really strong business case. And I think it doesn't just come from the places that you might expect with the changes in how people think and act related to sustainability. I think if you talk to the chief people officer, they will recognize sustainability's role in attracting and retaining great people to a business. If you talk to the CFO or the risk and compliance function, they will acknowledge the role that it has in reducing risk for a business and also anticipating some of the regulatory requirements that are coming up. It really drives efficiency as well. I mean, if I talk about the solar panel construction that we're having on some of our sites, that will actually save us money as a business. Similarly, reducing food waste in our operation drives efficiency from a cost perspective as well. So there are loads and loads of really strong factors that contribute to what I would say is an imperative for any kind of forward-facing business to have a strong focus on sustainability.
Just to sort of explore that further, your role is, encompasses insight. And I guess, do you have a perspective on the reputational value, on perception, on those kinds of metrics, and the impact that your promise is having there?
Yeah, we know that there are direct correlations between our progress in sustainability and also in related to business growth, because customers care about sustainability, so they'll choose a product or a brand that is more sustainable over one that is less. So, for instance, we know that customers retain better as Gusto customers if they can see, for example, less plastic in their Gusto box. And reducing plastic is an area that we've had a lot of progress in over the last few years. We managed to cut plastic in our boxes by 50% in 2021 by switching to more sustainable packaging and also launching what we call the Eco Chill Box, which is our cardboard insulator that keeps all of your ingredients fresh. We have a range of sustainability measures across the areas where we focus our efforts, where we're tracking progress against those targets, but we're also looking at perceptions among consumers. We look at features like brand I trust and is a sustainable company, and measure how this influences consideration to try Gusto. So we're tracking how that trends on an ongoing basis and how that is affected by the initiatives that we put out there.
So I guess, again, on the subject of consumers, has there been anything that's particularly surprised you, in what you've learned about them through this process, and also reflecting on your own role, if you will, as a consumer? Where do you find conflicts and challenges in your behaviour? What's hardest to solve? What's intractable?
I think the thing that's probably most surprised me is the sheer level of excitement about new ways of doing things that help to solve problems that people broadly acknowledge are significant problems that they can't necessarily see how they can be resolved in the short term. So back in 2021, we partnered with Exemplar, which is a spin out from the University of Cambridge, to create the world's first edible stock cube wrapper made from plant protein. So you have a wrapper that protects the stock cube in the Gusto box as it travels to a customer's house. You then drop it into the boiling water in a measuring jug or into a dish, and it dissolves alongside the stock. And it gives us a zero waste, fossil fuel free solution that has the potential to replace, in our case, 15.5 tons of plastic annually across our meal kits, and thousands more across the market. We ran our first customer trial back in 2021, and the trial recipes sold out within an hour of going on sale. And we obviously followed up with people asking about their perceptions of the trial, and 100%, a number that I don't think we ever really see in these kinds of trials, thought that we should continue development, and also 80% felt very comfortable using the products. So we're working with Exemplar to explore how we can scale production to include this in customer orders as the norm. In terms of the harder challenges when it comes to changing customer behavior, I think dietary change is a really tough nut to crack. I think one of the reasons why I love working in food is that it's about more than sustenance. It's got cultural resonance, it's about social connection, it's about memory. It's something that many of us are very emotionally invested in. So all of those things mean it can be hard to make a wholesale change to diet. So I think it is a gradual process, but we are seeing encouraging progress in that area.
Final question. So when we think about Gusto and similar kind of products and brands, we imagine that you sit in a broader kind of competitive set that includes many kind of deliverables that come to the home. So we could be thinking about fast food, etc. And I guess you have outlined the requirement for change and the opportunity that exists in change. What is it going to take to change those big players in this space, and what would be your message to them if you could give one?
Well, I think it's the responsibility of everyone in the food system, ourselves included. The thing I would say is that it is quite difficult, or very difficult, for a single company to make change on their own. Very few companies in the food area are vertically integrated. We share the same suppliers. Our supply chains are responsible for a lot of the environmental and social impact that we have. So we need to work together. And there is the clear imperative, I think, from looking at what is happening with the world, with global temperatures, with greenhouse gases, and also the supply chains and the risk associated with those supply chains in our food system. But I think there are also strong business imperatives, which we touched on a little bit before, around efficiency, around attracting and retaining great people. Also, investors are increasingly looking at this, and that applies both to private companies as well as publicly listed companies. The way that the wind is blowing, regulation is coming in this area. So it really helps to reduce risk and get ahead of those regulatory requirements to have a strong focus in this area.
Hugh, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really super interesting to hear your perspective and impressive to hear the work that Gusto's doing. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much for having me.